Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of LANGERR at the Mic. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Phillip Danault's quote from earlier today. I believe it was at the Journal de Montreal or La Presse, talking about his role change. And we're going to investigate that. I did a little bit of research, so we're going to review that and talk about whether his role actually changed and what it means going forward for the center position for the Montreal Canadiens in 2020-2021. So right off the bat, the quote that he said earlier today in the French media was "J'ai vu mon rôle changer en playoffs, mais avec ce que j'ai prouvé, mon rôle ne devrait pas changer à Montréal." So that basically means that he saw his role change in the playoffs, but from what he has proven in his time in Montreal, his role should not change as long as he's a Montreal Canadian. So, like I said, that begs the question: Did Phillip Danault's role really change? Let's look into that. And to look into that, I looked at three main things compared from the regular season in 2019-2020 and the playoffs. So I looked at three things. Number one was his stats, goals, assists, points, right? Just basic stats, right? Number two, his line mates. And number three, his face-offs, his situational face-off use by Claude Julien and Kirk Muller. So let's get into it. Regular season. So Phillip Danault played 71 games in the regular season. He scored 13 goals, 34 assists. That was good for 49 points, if I do my math, or 47 points, if I do my math correctly. Yeah. 54.5% on faceoffs and 18 minutes and 51 seconds on average ice time per game in the regular season. His line mates were Thomas Tatar and Brandon Gallagher, 56.7% of the time at even strength, right? As we all know, one of the most consistent lines on the Canadiens in recent years. And now his faceoffs. So this is where things get interesting. So his faceoffs he took 1,336 total faceoffs in the regular season, most on the team. Of those 1,336 faceoffs, 368 of those were in the offensive zone, good for 27.5% of those 1,336 faceoffs, and that was most on the team. So he took the most offensive zone faceoffs on the team in the regular season. 443 of those faceoffs, or 33.2% of those faceoffs, were in the neutral zone. Once again, most on the team. And 525 of those faceoffs were in the defensive zone at 39.3%. Once again, most on the team. So, in other words, in overall, I didn't really break down power play, even strength, and 4-on-4 and shorthanded and all that. But I did look at overall faceoffs, and he led the team overall in terms of faceoffs taken, and offensive zone faceoffs, neutral zone faceoffs, and defensive zone faceoffs. Phillip Danault led the team in all those categories. Now, let's look at the playoffs now. During the 2020 playoffs, Phillip Danault played 10 games. He scored 1 goal, added 2 assists for 3 points. He had a 54% faceoff percentage and increased his ice time to 19 minutes and 34 seconds per game. And now his line mates changed a little bit. At first, it was, it started, with Thomas Tatar and Brandon Gallagher, but this time 32.7% of the time at even strength. And it was Arturi Lehkonen and Paul Byron, 40.6% of the time at even strength. So right there, we can see a little bit of a change of role being played with more checking or defensive type forwards instead of offensive or two-way forwards in Tatar and Gallagher. Now, faceoffs. Here's where we see a little bit of a change here. So 224 total faceoffs were taken by Phillip Danault. Once again, led the team. He took 224 total faceoffs in the 2020 playoffs. 41 of those were in the offensive zone. 18.3% of those were in the offensive zone. And that was second on the team this time behind Nick Suzuki, 72. And this was a 9.2% decrease compared to the regular season. So already a decent amount or decent enough change. And 50 of those 224 faceoffs were in the neutral zone. So 22.3 were in the neutral zone, leading the team in the playoffs. And that's a 10.9% decrease compared to the regular season, because here 133 of those 224 faceoffs were taken in the defensive zone at 59.4%, most on the team by far. So that's a 20.1 increase compared to the regular season. So once again, did Phillip Danault's role change with the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs compared to the regular season? Based on what I what we just found today? Yes, it did. It absolutely did. And should that be the case? Should Phillip Danault's role be more what it was in the regular season, a bit of a hybrid or two-way type of role, both offensive, defensive, playing mostly with the top line of Gallagher and Tatar versus the playoffs, where he was mostly in a checking role, but still played a lot, still played 19 minutes, 34 seconds. So should it be like it was in the regular season or should it be in the playoffs? Well, I definitely think that going forward it should be in the playoffs because given the emergence of Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, both from an offensive and also even a two-way standpoint, right? I think now we can say that the Kotkaniemi-Suzuki combination should be like a 1-2 type of punch, and then Phillip Danault would play after that. Right. So going forward, it should be what it was in the playoffs because clearly the Canadians were an elite defensive team. Like I talked about in my video yesterday, they averaged 1.9 goals against per game. So they needed, that was largely in part obviously due to Carey Price's goaltending, but also due to Phillip Danault's defensive play. I actually I did forget to mention plus minuses. I mean, he was a -1 in the playoffs. In the regular season, I think I mentioned yesterday, plus 18. So, like I said, just a much more defensive-focused role, and I think that's what the Canadians honestly need. That's what he does best, right? So, going forward, that should be the case as Kotkaniemi and Suzuki take the 1-2 or the offensive, more offensive roles going forward, while Danault still takes the key offensive faceoff. So now let's talk a little bit more about his future on the team. So this 2020-21 season or upcoming, whatever, whether it's all in 21 or 2020-2021, whichever it is his contract year. It's a contract year for Phillip Danault, and his and he'll be in the market. He'll be a unrestricted free agent if he doesn't get re-signed before the end of the league year. So that means, and his cap hit is a $3.08 million cap hit. So that means in 2020, 2021, he should absolutely keep his defensive role, right? And still play a lot, right? Because again, it was the playoffs, and yes, the playoffs are more demanding, right? And there are a lot more, important faceoffs in the playoffs versus the regular season. But that isn't to say that he should see a dip in ice time, right? So the only way that I guess his ice time should decrease a little bit, I mean, you could even say then that if it's a close game or if the Canadians are down by 1 or 2 goals, yes, Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, maybe Domi if he's on the team or whichever offensive replacement is brought in for Domi should play more than Danault in situations where the Canadians are down by 1 or 2. But then again, who's going to take all those important faceoffs? That's where Phillip Danault's got to come in and take all those important faceoffs, right? So like I said, he keeps his role in 2020, 2021, right, as a third line, second line center. But here's the thing, though. I wouldn't even say a third line or second line center because, again, based on ice time, based on use by Claude Julien or Kirk Muller, or whoever's going to be the head coach in next year, it is going to vary very much by situation, by the game situation, right? So I wouldn't really call him a third line center. He's just one of your primary defensive centers going into next year. Or if he's not okay with that, and if the Canadians have a good opportunity to move him for a valuable offensive piece, meaning a player that's going to be guaranteed to be, a 25, 30 goal scorer and almost a point per game type of player, maybe the Canadians should look into moving him. Maybe. I mean, Kasperi Kapanen got traded by the Toronto Maple Leafs today for a first-round pick, so we can't really hit on the Leafs for not having a first-round pick anymore. But the situation of Phillip Danault going into next year is a very back and forth situation, right? Either he's a very valuable defensive center, or he could be, I mean, I don't know what his trade value would be, but he could be a potentially valuable trade asset for a contender that needs that depth at center, right? That needs that defensive center. But then that would also leave a huge hole for the Canadians in the bottom nine. I won't say bottom 6. I'll say bottom 9, because then they'll have to replace his outstanding face-off ability and defensive play, which I don't know if Jake Evans is ready to take over those duties of taking important face-offs just yet. So it'll be interesting to see. And so if so, that's my video on today. Just wanted to share my research and really investigate Phillip Danault's role change and what should be going forward. If you enjoyed my commentary, then as usual, like this video and subscribe to my channel. And you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Langer, both on Instagram and Twitter. I'll include that in the description below on the live replay. And this has been an episode of Langer at the Mic Live. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.